Hello, Mike. Good morning.
Good morning, Jack. Welcome back, and thank you to all our listeners. Is that a thing? No, it's not a listener. I don't know. Viewers,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Anyone who's tuning
good.
in, we're really happy to have you, and we do our best to have something interesting to say. Jack and I both met yesterday, which was really fun, and we talked over our schemy schemes, which I will tell you, Jack, I'm still trying to find someone not in finance. Maybe our
Mhm.
finance pro will have to be GPT because it's weird how specialized it gets, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
the overall, I guess an economist. That's what we would need, right? We need an economist because they don't care about the details, they care about the system. So we'll get Daniel Kahneman to help us out with, our
yeah.
motivators. Unless he's not dead, is he? I hope he's not. Poor
Well, I
Dan.
don't know, but the Citadel company moved out of Chicago, so there's significantly fewer specialists in finance now
Uh,
available.
well, actually, speaking of not untimely deaths, but apparently Brian Wilson died. Is that right? I just think I saw that, but that's a shame. Good old
Mhm.
Brian Wilson.
No, I did not hear.
It's hard to tell sometimes. I don't know
Mm.
the way the news is lately. It's well, let's hope he's still alive because
Mm.
we all love ourselves at Brian Wilson and someone else. Anyway, um, so we did speak yesterday, and I'll start with congratulations. I did read your piece that you posted on LinkedIn, and I thought maybe you could share something about that because I do think I need some help because you have the context really clear in your mind, and I'm trying to understand the context in my frame of mind. So um, that would be fun. And then I think I want to complain about the Google DeepMind guy really quick, but we could do that later.
Yeah, I think that the generally speaking, self-improvement is probably, I don't know, maybe that was the only holy grail in AI always, or maybe it's another one. But yeah, I think that we are looking at an opportunity to develop systems that now can have an internal dialogue with
Oh,
themselves, right?
okay.
Like
Hmm.
we know that is doable, right? You can talk to a GPT, but what if you have two GPTs that are trying to get organized together? And that process might lead to an improvement in the use case application, right? So typically, what we're gonna have is typically you're trying to solve some problem, and you formulate the task, right? That it's, hey, you are a contract review system, or you are a code generating system, and I need something special.
Hmm.
And often that something special is very difficult to do, even if you are talking to an expert that may, even in a perfect situation where there is absolute will to help, and there is will to spend a lot of time with an engineer like me, for example. We are not making enough progress to make this system scalable and useful in a time frame that is acceptable. So maybe I can share my screen for a moment, and I think I came up um, with an architecture that I think could be useful. So do you see my screen, Mike?
I do. No, this is perfect because I can then wolf down a little of this ramen while you're showing that and not bother people. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So generally speaking, right, you have a GPT, so you have an LLM, right? You have large language model that is this expert maybe, but for sure that is something that you can talk to, right? And
Hmm.
definitely it can be prompted to provide an answer that is relevant, maybe not perfect, right? So the starting point today, without the self-learning or optimization or autonomous optimization, would be that you will formulate a task, and then maybe you will have some sort of a kind of like preconditions, post conditions. So you formulate the task. Hey, I want to edit the documents, and then you're going to start getting into details. Like, hey, so let's optimize the task and list the specific little little details that are important. So that is another thing that we typically have, and then maybe we will have some sort of a context. Maybe this is going to be a document that is supposed to be reviewed, or piece of code that that maybe is going to be used as an example, or something. Right? And then maybe you will have also something like an example of a correct output. This in generative AI circles is called maybe multi-shot, right? So like you have one shot or multi-shot, right? So maybe I will have one document, so that would be like a one-shot learning setup, or maybe multiple, so I will have multiple shots, right? On top of that, I might have expert instructions, maybe a transcript from a session with an expert. Maybe it's going to be just a direct discussion, or maybe it's just going to be volunteered information. That is actually quite important, but maybe a topic for another meeting of ours. Like, hey, how those expert instructions are supposed to be like, how they are supposed to look like. Right. But anyway, let's assume that right now we have that. So now we can. So now let's say that we will kind of submit all this to the large language model, right? So so there is going to be some sort of an output, right? So maybe there is going to be output 0, right? And maybe without self-learning, maybe self-improvement. Without self-improvement, that's going to be the final thing. Okay, so that's it, right? So output AI 0 is, that's it. And then maybe I will make a manual changes in the task because maybe I didn't like it, or maybe I liked it, and that's the end of the story, right? But let's say I didn't like it, right? So what I would do as a human to improve the system? Well, I will start modifying the task, right? So I will start rewriting it. And I'm doing this manually, but maybe that is not the right thing. Maybe I will manually start optimizing the little details, right? The precondition, post conditions, contextual dependencies, all that stuff. But again, maybe me looking at the text of everything that I got, maybe I'm not as good as I think. Maybe the AI is going to do a better job in kind of discovering little dependencies that maybe I'm missing, right? I still have my source document. I still have the correct documents, and I still have expert instructions, but they also can be growing, because maybe next week I will have another meeting with another expert, and I will append, maybe, something else. But what if, this thing here, this blue line, so the output from the LLM is not just the output that got generated. And by the way, this is kind of high level a little bit.
No, yeah, I'm getting it. Yeah.
So there's some maybe subloops and some subroutines here. But what if there is this blue line coming from the LLM that is going to tell me, hey, so I can see the output, I see the correct output, so I definitely see the stuff that maybe there's discrepancies, and I see your task and I see your optimization task. Hey, let me get you another version of the task. And if that's something that we can put together, then we are building this evolutionary memory model that now becomes an extended task, extended optimization that can be maybe fed into this thing in a loop, and start kind of like making this self-improvement process where, maybe I will do it manually, just kind of like just with my knowledge, but maybe LLM can make the better job and create those blue boxes for me that will kind of either appended or replaced. The memory management question is another kind of maybe something for another discussion. I have some thoughts about how this can be done, but for now, I think that this is extremely promising, and that's what I think that can be kind of interesting, even for those things that we've been discussing yesterday together.
Yeah. Oh, well, let me see if I can understand. And I do see the concept, which is good. I guess so. So number one, at least in my mind, and I could be getting this wrong, that what happened with deep reasoning is that I would go in with some sort of prompt, and we can say prompt is a series of words that create some sort of vector space that is then solved, right? Like that. This is sort of like if I gave it 2 + 2, you know, whatever, it's going to say 4, whatever. So it's not going to come up with anything without a vector to start with, which I always think is another issue, right? Because agentic things have to be aware, right? Like things happen just because they happen, right? But we'll get there in a minute, right? But let's say all of this is about prompting and outcomes, okay? So what I understand, and maybe I'm getting your thing mixed up with this, is that what it did is it took my somewhat naive way of creating a vector and it created a much more elaborate vector, right? Like it broke it down into, and even that word breaking it down is in a sense sort of like a little magic trick, right? Like, hey, if I just make this more verbose, your vector is going to be a lot more useful for this output that seemingly is going to be an answer, right? Like that's the point, right? It wants to one-shot it, but because my way of describing my problem is probably pretty bad, right? Like I'm not great at describing problems, you know. And in this world, right? I mean, the problems are pretty. Even though it's a world of articulation, legal stuff, right? It's still pretty nasty, right? Because words are not very precise. Anyway, so all I'm saying is tell me if I'm on the right track with concept. Is this iterating through frames, or is it like expanding like this reasoning model does?
Yeah. So I like your reference to kind of making, to elaboration, right? So making the prompt elaborate, right? So I think that's kind of like exactly what I'm thinking, right? Let me maybe qualify this a little bit. Elaborate and consistent. That's the name of the game, right? So here, in some tasks, maybe programming or document analytics, yes, there's going to be like a lot of nuances, but you don't wanna kind of like in all those nuances, you don't wanna kind of lose the consistency, and maybe kind of in the first paragraph of the instructions, you tell the AI, hey, you need to remove word ABC,
Right,
and then in paragraph number 25, you're going to say, hey, you absolutely have to keep the word ABC in the document because it's important, right? So that is probably this elaboration and consistency management is I would say is the key issue here, right? Like the AI is not going to be reacting well if I am inconsistent, but it's going to be reacting very well to if I'm very specific, if my optimization task is very very detailed and consistent at the same time. So there's no internal contradictions in there. And so yeah, I agree with your assessment. And yeah, so each time, let's say I'm starting with maybe the black boxes, which was my initial naive type description, right? I'm gonna run the loop, and after the first loop, I'm gonna get a modification, right? And then maybe task modification 0 would be a replacement, or maybe it's going to be an append. The evolutionary memory management process in itself is an interesting topic, but either way, even if I am appending something to the task or replacing, then I'm kind of extending the complexity or the level of elaboration in my instructions.
Oh yeah,
And
every time you put the N in there, we can trigger all the people to say that that's always an interesting thing to do, right? These N level problems.
Yeah. And
kind
also
of become their own problem space, right?
Yeah, and also what I'm noticing is that the edits, they don't have to kind of hill climb towards perfection, right? So maybe edit generated edit 0 is going to be slightly better, but maybe generated edit one is going to be slightly worse.
Right.
So,
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, this is
right.
Apple's thing, right? Do you want to go there? Because that's what Apple was just complaining about.
Exactly, exactly. And in AI, it's a very well-known phenomenon, right? Like in the learning process, you don't have to hill climb smoothly towards an optimal or
Oh,
suboptimal
it
solution.
collapses really quick,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So that means that does it mean that generative edit AI one should not be a foundation for task modification one because maybe it went down, or
Mm,
maybe it should be included in there because the AI is going to benefit from a negative example as well, right? So it's
mm.
ideal, if you have negative and positive examples. So again, that kind of goes into the memory management question. How do I kind of make sense out of this? But the idea is that yeah, I mean, in my outcome analytics, right, I might go in the positive direction, which I want, right, but maybe I'm going in the negative direction as well, which is also useful, right? And as long as I have a measure, hey, those instructions created a negative or slightly less lower scoring outcome, then that's also a useful information, right? And AI can make a mistake because maybe the problem formulation was incorrect, or maybe it was not sufficiently nuanced to the problem at hand. Because remember, we have those correct outcomes that were created by humans with years of practice and a lot of experience. So I have that kind of like a local maximum or a correct
Mm.
outcome towards which I'm striving. So I know quite a bit about how good AI 0, AI 1, AI N are with respect to what the experts want. So that is a pretty simple concept if you look now at this, because that's what we are all doing by hand. So why not do it automatically, since the AI can talk to the generated edits, can talk to the document, can compare the two documents very effectively, and can then list, hey, here are the things that we did. And so I think that this could be quite an interesting proposition.
No, it's awesome. Can I now this is maybe a tangent, but it just happened and maybe it's just on top of my mind, which is I'm not sure. We talked a little bit about the derivatives market and
Mhm.
very briefly, but not to
Mhm.
over-explain the derivatives market. And I still want to complain about Demis Hassabis, I guess. Demis Hassabis? Don't let me forget. I have him up here so I can complain about him.
Okay.
So here is my issue, which is I'm analyzing a portfolio, and I always find that GPT or whatever is really good at this kind of stuff, right? Like you can just feed it in a bunch of facts and figures, and you can ask questions about it. And I really am always amazed at how the storytelling ability is kind of magical, right? Because that's
Mhm.
often what we lack, right? We don't get a personal narrative on our own personal things. We get generic narratives about generic things, and we're supposed to learn how to apply it to our own situations, which can take you a lifetime, right? I mean, it isn't efficient, right? But if you need advice on your own X, Y, or Z, that's what you tend to put into these experts, right? I want an
Mhm.
expert to tell me this. So this proxying an expert is what I asked it. I said, here's this situation, and I kind of understand this and that, and I'm just going to ask it about different scenarios. And it was pretty good. And I learned a little bit about the techniques being used in this one portfolio, which is about options trading. Then I said, well, I want to try trading some options. And then basically it said, we came up with a scenario and then we came up with a strike price. And anyway, it kind of guided me through this entire kind of option that I had never used, right? It's too sophisticated for me because it's kind of complicated and I don't know what to look for. So I wouldn't have never tried it on my own, right? Like it's
Mhm.
too complicated. And then it sort of explained why it's complicated, why it's confusing. And in the end of the day, I was going to do this, but then I realized that, oh, and also is saying like, oh, and the math on this is usually wrong. Like you have to
Mhm.
know that it's supposed to act this particular way. Am I getting close to kind of the job that people do? You see what I mean? Like there's no real hard and fast rules because you're dealing with too many variables in probably these scenarios, right? To make it an easily solvable problem, right? It has nuances, which is great because that's why we're here, right? We don't necessarily always have to do the right thing, but I was still impressed that it got me to the point where I decided to do nothing, which I always think is a good outcome from understanding, right?
Mhm.
Like you understand that you don't know enough, right?
Mhm.
And you shouldn't act. So very happy. I'm not giving, maybe I'm not giving this the right connection to your work, and apologies for that. But I kept thinking like it was an interesting way to engage in a kind of a dialogue that does have real purpose, right? I could have pressed the button and bought this option,
Mhm.
which is an actual activity, but I didn't understand it, and therefore it was able to use really no expertise at all, right? It's just a bunch of vectors, but
Mhm.
it's good enough, sort of, right? Is that
Mhm.
it? Am I getting anywhere close to your insight? Because I don't mean to take you off track.
Yeah, so in my example, the blue boxes were the kind of the meta prompt, right? In
Right,
your
right.
example, you as a human, you are the meta prompt. So your
I'm the meta.
yeah, so you are kind of directing the AI to kind of answer, provide solution to the problem. In my example, the blue boxes are the meta prompt so that they do it automatically, right? So so the connection is there, right? I think that yeah that is a great business idea. I mean, I can think about, let's say, connecting a system that is self-learning to something like a quant information from Morningstar, right? I mean, that is a gold mine where if you could kind of like start talking about those massive amounts of data. So yeah, I mean, I can see the attraction, definitely in the derivatives or in the equity markets. Yeah.
Well, and you bring up another puzzle, which I don't know the answer to, and forgive me, I don't know if you do either, because and you know how much I love bringing up. I think it's pronounced girdle, right? Girdle.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't. Anyway,
mm,
don't know how to pronounce things, but I always bring them up because good touchstone in my own education about this kind of strange person who did this strange thing, right? But what I'm interested in is when I'm talking in a prompt, I usually have a voice which tends to ask a question or state something. You see what I mean? Like I have my own voice, and then often I paste in things that I've written or done something, some other source, right? Like this um, data from this trading platform, I pasted that in or whatever. So there's like two
mm,
voices at work. And personally, I've used this convention of just using a little bit of HTML. Like sometimes, just to be clear, I'm like, I do a context tag because I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't want you to mix them up. It almost never does mix them up, which puzzles me. And then I'm only saying this because I don't know that LLMs have metacognition, right? Like they kind of don't, right? Or how is that even possible, right? Because you are asking, the biggest question is like, can you keep a meta layer?
mm,
Like a system prompt is kind of a meta layer, but it just gets baked in to every prompt, doesn't it? Right? After a while, like
mm,
it's just more prompt. Like we said, it's the elaboration thing. Don't use M dashes, by the way. Have you gotten into the M dash problem? you know
mm,
well, apparently that's the big giveaway of AI, is that it loves to use M dashes for
mm,
pauses, which is great, except it's a weird key, so we don't use it that much because you have to know a weird key combination to get an M dash. So
mm.
for humans, we don't use it as often as it does. Okay, so unpacking a little bit, does LLMs don't understand meta, right? In the way that we think of meta.
Well, kind of depends on your definition of meta level,
Yeah.
thinking, right? So now we have planning models that will explicitly kind of show the internal questions that the AI is trying to answer to reach the conclusion. So that is kind of a meta level reasoning, right? Or although some people might call it planning. Now you don't have much control I mean, you kind of do, but out of the box, right? Let's say you just ask a question, what's the time today, right?
Sure.
You don't have much control over that, but yeah, I mean, you could sway the model to kind of think about in terms of maybe non-monotonic logic, right? Like, hey, I need a solution that is going to be based on the fact that all birds can fly, but there's an ostrich, and an ostrich doesn't fly, right? So the kind of like a non-monotonic level question, and I want the solution to be in the declarative system, of John McCarthy's abnormal logic or something like that, right? So yeah, so you have quite a bit of kind of influence, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of have like full influence. Like I'm trying to stop the AI from kind of doing these things like, hey, your goal is important, great question, something like that, right? I'm just kind of trying, hey, you
I
are
haven't
just
turned
gonna
that part off yet. I should.
yeah, so I really want the AI to do evaluations according to the rubrics, right? That I want. I don't want any kind of like a flowery language. I just want it to be right to the point. And so yeah. So in the agentic architecture, like the one that I've shown you, yeah, I think that it's all meta level. Actually, I would say there's several meta levels because I'm controlling the actual prompt. Then I have the meta prompt, and now I can control the meta prompt as well. I mean, how do I manage meta prompts, right? So that is the second level of meta, right? So I think this is going to be really interesting. And for me, like kind of on the engineering side, this is quite exciting. For people like the Apple thing, like, hey, it's not a real, the paper, like it's not real thinking, it's just matrix multiplication. Well, I got bad news. Blue sky is not really blue, right? It's just a frequency. So I mean, we can kind of we can take it apart, but I think at the end of the day, for guys like me, this is quite an exciting playground.
Well, I think we're both there. I mean, my only prediction is we're still in the infancy, and we're still in the architectural layer, if you want to call it that, right? Like we don't know where it goes, even though it has practical uses. It's sort of like the internet was. Like it had practical uses to begin with, but it didn't have anything like what it became until all sorts of strange things happen, right? Like it was unpredictable, right, as to where it would go. And I still think that's my take, right? It's still unpredictable, even though it shows these traits that are useful, but that I think that's just our own bias, because every day I read about like, what are we all going to do for a living stuff, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, it doesn't do anything to that layer. That's a real meta layer, right? A human layer is so meta that it doesn't really, just because I can swipe my watch and get onto the train, you see what I mean? Like that isn't, it's a huge achievement, but it isn't that big of a change in my day-to-day life, right? It's just more efficient way of doing X. And so to get back architecturally, because I think I'm still a little confused, because there is no meta layer in processing. However, if I go back to your beginning, wasn't the first person that got roundly ignored when neural nets were a thing, talked about putting it through again? Like that was part of the goal, was to keep going through the process and refining it. That was like the breakthrough, where we didn't do any extra work. We just redid the wave function and got it a little better, right? Like you're just sort of seeing resonances easier because you just keep repeating yourself in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a very old concept. I think one of the first ideas was the back propagation
Right.
networks, neural
And they
networks,
thought he
where
was dumb, by the way, right?
yeah.
Whoever that
So
was.
yeah. So I mean, yeah. So let's keep some of the output, as an input and feed it again into the system. And turns out that was a great improvement in terms of the architecture. So yeah, I still kind of feel like an imposter here. Like,
Oh
hey,
my God.
I mean,
By the way, have you ever heard vocals without reverb? It sounds terrible. That's the whole point. Like
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
loves to be amplified and
yeah,
repeated. It
yeah.
makes our brains happy, right? Like that's
Mm.
kind of the way we work, right? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So the
I'm a
so
Reverb
those
fan.
yeah, so here I am presenting a diagram that is kind of like what we do every day, right? And we don't call it anything fancy. We just kind of do it manually, the same way we write computer code, the same way we do a lot of other things, like wash the dishes, right? Sometimes the dishes
Yeah.
are not washed properly, and we have to repeat and kind of maybe change little things that we do. So yeah, but this is so exciting that the AI now can make the evaluation, can talk to itself, can talk to the document,
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of come up with something new. And I think when I was doing some of the tasks for the document review, legal analytics, I mean, I felt like I'm at the end of my kind of like levels or limits of being diligent and cognitively, I don't think I can come up with more nuances to capture everything that they are telling me. And that's usually, it's a rapid fire information. So okay, so I have a transcript. Let's give this transcript to the AI, and let's kind of have some sort of an analysis on the words. And that's a powerful thing. So that's why I don't think, when I'm looking at these kind of things, I don't think generative AI is overhyped. I think it's underhyped, because yeah, maybe it's not real, but the outcomes are close enough.
Well, also I think there's a real plus. I know we probably differ on this a little bit, but I think because of the human language is really gamified, and so now let me complain about Demis. I'll
Mhm.
just complain about all British people at this moment because I did
All
see
right.
him talk, and it was this thing about, yes, when you have a computable problem and you have this fascination as he did, like with chess or Go or, any of these kind of gaming
Mhm.
problems, and then you get this reinforcement learning and you luck out a bunch of times, I suppose, whatever, and you come up with this great thing. Well, then you move on to another realm, which is protein folding, and we talked a little bit about whatever that means, right? Like the problems aren't necessarily in the computable realm, right? The problems are
Mhm.
in this other realm that we kind of easily dismiss, which is my beef about robotics, right? You don't understand the world of causation and you never can. And therefore, somehow, why would you ever be able to replace what we do, like you said, so naturally, right? We don't have any problems with multimodal anything. And I even have another article I'm trying to write. Like, there is never too much information, right? If you can't process it, you'll just ignore it, which is what we do constantly, right? Like, we
Mhm.
never pay that much attention,
Mhm.
right? And therefore, because we already have all these filters built in, because we're able to mimic them in a machine, which I think is great, right? Because I think that
Mhm.
LLMs at the moment are great storytelling machines, right? They
Yeah.
understand how to build narratives, which I think are as valuable as anything there is almost, right? Because people don't understand anything really that isn't a narrative. You can understand a car screeching down the street and you can say, oh my gosh, you know, uh, it's a dangerous neighborhood. People are driving badly, and then you get into Kahneman's world, right? Like, which is that we don't know anything, but we make it up as we go
Mhm.
along, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And even, I guess we blame AI. It'll just make it up too, right? It's rare for it to be like, no
Mhm.
clue, sorry, right? Which is what I think people are so fascinated with, right? Like it used to be in, do you remember Google in the day? Speaking of what else did I have? Oh, and Demis wants to now that he's solved protein folding, he wants to go into P or NP,
Mhm.
which the answer is NP. So you don't need to, you don't need to go much further because just the fact of reality makes NP, right? Even though it's like, oh yeah, we can understand the growth patterns and you know what I mean, and we can understand this thing, and it's like, well, you can't really. You can dissect things, but you can't really understand them so much. I mean, the natural world, I don't know. All right, I'm on the fence about that. There's some things you can understand, but we are
Mhm.
also locked in a frame that is hard to get out of, right? We can't, we can be very meta level. We both love our Einsteins, right? Who can think like, what if I was doing this, and what if I was on a beam of light kind of stuff, which I think is wonderful, right? That's what we should do. We should try to imagine things that we can't perceive.
Yeah.
And actually that's our
Mhm.
magic. I think we're unique in probably everything that we can do that. And yay, good for us. We're
Yeah.
really, really blessed, right? That we aren't in a
Mhm.
causal world, even though we live in one. We are in a world of imagination, which is even better, right? And anyway, so this idea of wanting to find another, I think it's funny that I believe that they think that Mars is a solvable problem. That's what I'm thinking is really amusing, because I'm like, we've seen plenty of these stories before, right? Everything goes wrong that you
Mhm.
had no anticipation of, right? Because you don't know anything, but you think it's a controlled you because you're getting rid of people is what usually is the deal, right? Like we
Mhm.
won't have pesky people to mess things up. But then, again, like you said, toxic dust and, everything else is now a problem, that you never had to deal with. Anyway, sorry. So my rant is that I was a little bit disappointed, but maybe the whole thing too is that as humans, we have our peak and then we just drop off too, right? Like there's probably a thing where you just don't get much better at anything. And maybe if you're lucky, you can have some insights early on or something and make your name and coast, right? But I think it's very difficult to have a long series of repetitive successes. And maybe that's what Apple finally figured out is like, you can't mimic this, right? You can't just make things more complicated and have things deliver more insight. Like it's not exponential. All right. So anyway, that was too much griping.
Mhm.
And with no
Yeah.
question, sorry, Jack. My pontificating again. I don't know.
Well, it's true. It feels like it's true, right? Like in the world of science or in the world of chess or professional sports, right? Yeah, I mean that it's very true what you're saying. So I would hope that doesn't have to be true in every single area, or I'm hoping that maybe that neural link, that people are working on is going to be that that next thing that is going to because I mean maybe it's going to be enlightenment, right? I mean it's just going to be something that, hey, I mean I'm just going to connect myself to a computer system and suddenly my brain will feel like it's kind of you know kind of kind of on a different level, right? So
Mm.
I think I am a little kind of idealistic here. I think the reality is going to be much different, uh, but yeah, I'm hoping that. But going back to the Mars thing, I think that it's if there is political will, right, competition between countries or
Oh, I
superpowers,
don't know. I
then
mean,
then they will find the money, they will find the resources, and they will go and maybe stay there for a month and come back, and then that's it. I don't know. I think the Apollo program was exactly like that, but it was a great adventure.
well, I think there's certainly something more symbolically interesting about the moon, right? I mean, we basically have a very intimate relationship with it, and it affects us day to day, and it's
Mm.
nearby, I guess. So, energy is a thing. You know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
And that's another big part of this, right? Is this idea of where does all the well, not really where the energy comes from, but harnessing and understanding how we deal with energy for these projects is certainly an undercurrent of how their um, use could be uh, whatever how we could artificially make the conditions different, right? It's a thing of I was just looking into my youth and kind of remembering this non-rose colored glasses, like things were kind of terrible. I don't think anyone remembers like the rampant pollution and the different rivers being caught on fire, and just basically the things that the world was about when growth and prosperity was sort of getting off the ground. People would cheat, and so my next chapter is actually about how do you manage people not cheating with AI, right?
Mm.
How do you say, this thing doesn't really care, right? So what's the malicious use? Like you're saying, and if there is a malicious use that could be understood, could you legislate around it? But the same thing is true of, we live in a very energy intensive place because we don't have that many people and we have lots of energy, I guess, right? Whereas I lived in Japan, where people don't know what it's like not to have heat in the wintertime, which I remember well. It's cold. And I certainly was not used to it. Every Japanese person is, because they just know you don't have a big tub of hot water all the time, right? You heat the water when you need it. You don't have all this energy to burn,
Mm.
right? You live in a small place that has to conserve in order to support the population. And I think you make those decisions legislatively or culturally to say, we don't like what's the most egregious recent energy expenditure that I mean, it happens a lot in America, right? Like,
Mm.
we tend to love to blow things up for no reason or whatever, just because we can, right? We don't have the same mindset. But that's why I'm saying, even going from one part of the planet to the other, you can have a totally different perspective on what's reasonable and feasible. And maybe that's why we get some of these weird breakthroughs, because we just don't have those constraints, right? Like, we don't have a ton of legislation. I told you my ethics thing was about, isn't anything to do with AI really just speech, right? Like, it doesn't do anything. And because speech um, can't be really regulated, because you can say whatever you want, doesn't mean you have to do anything, correct? you know so either
Yeah.
way, yeah, I just never thought of computing as ever having any legislatable action. But I know that they got on Google about cookies, right? And that was just a weird, cool part of the internet, where they're like, hey, we can just track and capture pretty good data about you, right? Why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
It's a computer. It doesn't care, right? And what are people's cookie caches, are in the megabytes, and who knows, right? There's all this
Mm.
information, but you don't care. You're just on your computer, right? It's sort of this underlying, like, can it do something evil just because it can, and somebody can make it do that? And can that will that change with GPT or generative? I mean, I don't know. Sorry, again, ramble, but
Yeah, definitely. It has a lot of potential, a lot more potential than the cookies. So, speech or language, written language is the carrier of intelligence, right? So we are now at the time where we are not sending cookies, just collections of unique numbers. We are actually transferring intelligence from one place to another. So I think this is as powerful as it gets. Maybe there's going to be something to be said in quantum world, where there might be some sort of other carriers of intelligence, but speech is the one. So we are
see,
kind
I,
of.
I put everything down a notch. Here's my pyramid, right? Like, we go from data to pattern to
Mm.
information, and
Mm.
then you start to tap out. That's what here's our curve again, right? Like, it's pretty not that hard to get there, although you can spend your whole world in data, right? Fabulous
Mm.
world to stay in. Pattern happens to be maybe my world of design, but also kind of our human superpower we thought once, right? Is that we can
Mm.
see things that aren't there, right? But now it's
Mm.
really good at the pattern layer, and information is just context, right? Hey, here's a good deal on rubber gloves. You know what I mean? Like, that's just some information, but then above it is knowledge. I'm
Mm.
focusing 100% that I think that is our superpower. Like, we can have knowledge, and knowledge is really challenging. Although we've also commodified it a little bit with things like ratings, you know, that's kind of a knowledge or any sort of social proof. So we could say, hey, I'm not really going to learn this. I'm just going to go look it up on Wikipedia. You know, that's fine. I mean, you've outsourced that knowledge to Wikipedia, but it's still not a terrible trade-off since we can't understand everything. If you needed to understand a word, looking it up is kind of a knowledge layer, right? Like, oh, here's the definition. But as you know, it doesn't tell you anything. It just sort of says, well, it can mean this or it can mean this. And you see what I mean? Like it's more training you to say, oh, in this context, they must be talking about gloves for your hands and not gloves for your, you know what I mean? Like you still have to do most of the mental work, which is why being a child is fun, right? Because you make all these mistakes. You don't know what knowledge is really. And you're just trying to figure out information. And then lastly, of course, you get to wisdom, or I call it trust sometimes, because it's sort of inherent in relationship. Anyway, it's much higher. I'm just saying to me, it'll never get there. That's my thing. It's like, this is our realm, right? Like to be trustworthy and to be knowledgeable to me are very challenging and worthwhile pursuits for us. Whereas it used to be just being good at data could be your whole be all end all, right? Your life is just about being a good data gatherer, and thank you to all scientists, right? Because sometimes that's all they ever do, come up with a way to gather some data. Yeah. And again, super useful. All I'm saying is they can't ever go up. You see what I mean? Saying, I've cured cancer. You see, like, no, here in this scenario that you gathered this data for, this outcome happened. But you didn't go here, but guess what all the news stories report, right? New breakthrough, you see what I mean? Everything is about going to the top because people just don't, you know, want to think, I guess, sometimes. And I think this you know, this DeepMind guy, it's sort of on this wavelength, right? You get into something that's useful, but then it suddenly gets into hype and overselling of it, because we want to pretend things are knowledgeable and wisdom, but they're hard won, right? This is where's my my I Ching isn't around here, but you know, here's thousands of years of thinking about something codified into the paths, right? Or the way, right? Here it is. Like, you know, you don't have to go much farther because they thought about it for 1,000 years, you know, and they wrote it in a book, but it still doesn't tell you what to do.
Yeah.
But that's great. But I'm saying revel in that. That's what's so awesome, right? Like you can navigate that. We can do that. I just don't think that the machines don't get to do that, right? They can't. I don't think it's not even contextually relevant, right? That they could see that they themselves are a construct of, you know, this pyramid, right? You know, that your wisdom, that Baskin Robbins Rocky Road is the best ice cream ever. You know, that's your truth, man. It doesn't have anything to do with all of ice cream. You know what I mean? It wasn't built on any foundation, but it's true to you. You know, and that's a good thing, right? You know, I could tell you, oh wait, I know so many better ice creams, but that's the truth. You know, it's wisdom to me, and that's what I think makes, you know, us, you know, interesting. Whereas I don't know that, you know, mimicking that doesn't make much sense. That's all. I think it's a great trick, right?
Yeah,
it can get close. I mean, it could tell you that it's the best ice cream, but you know what I mean? Is that really wisdom? You know, it kind of isn't, right? Oh, I have explored every Reddit sub thing, and Rocky Road from Baskin Robbins is the best ice cream. You know, you're right. Sorry, my dad was a big fan of Rocky Road ice cream, I guess. That's why. But is that a bad example? Am I making any sense?
No, I think there is, I see what you're saying. my counter example might
Please.
be here in the world of music, right? People are now feeding those famous records into the AI and asking the AI to repeat those patterns and create something new, kind of like creating another ice cream, right? And then they give people kind of like those outcomes to rate, right? And they are rated very, very highly, right? People are like, hey, I cannot believe, that, I mean, this is a great melody, right? So I think that there is, maybe it's real, maybe it's not real. Maybe the taste, really, AI doesn't have any taste, in music or in ice cream. However, right, the AI can produce very good music, or I'm sure it could probably tweak the recipe and come up with a very good ice cream as well. So yeah, I guess, as you know, I'm in the camp where maybe the ghost in the machine is not necessary for a lot of things, or maybe it will emerge. But our biological brains are very special, but maybe you know, but maybe not that special. I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
I think it's great to get that opinion, and I personally love this because this is why it's great to have people with contrasting experiences and, like, you know what I mean. We bring each of our ice creams to bear, and we don't have to win, right? Because there is no answer. There is no empirically good tune. You know, I guess maybe for release, it's not a bad tune, right? Simple to play, memorable. I don't know.
Mm.
Whatever. Um, there's no winning that game, I think, right? And that's why, I can still be disappointed in this person, because it's like you can play the game and win, but the game was never about winning, right? If you and I should play chess sometimes, because it's like it certainly doesn't have much to do with winning. It has to do with being challenged to even try to go beyond your own skill, or to take advantage of something strange or whatever, right? Like if I'm taking a walk in the woods, or if I'm walking down the street and I see something, because I'm just at a slow enough pace and don't have anything to do, I take a picture, right? And my pictures cannot be, they can be fodder to AI, but no, it would never take these pictures because it can't see what I see, right? And I think that's great, right? Because then there's just the endless amounts of experiences that you can draw on. Like you just said, I can read a book of somebody who wrote this book 100 years ago. My favorite book, Pessoa, right? 100 and something years ago, never meant to be read. And yet you can go and experience this person's thoughts and life and everything, right? And it's just like, wow, this is great, right? This is not experiencing life, it's experiencing someone being able to tell a story. And I'm going to get to the storytelling and game playing thing after I get rid of all the terrible things that we do. Right? Because we're really good at those things. And actually, I think if I don't think the Tarot of Hanoi puzzle is that fun of a game, but as you can see, if AI sort of taps out when the game gets a little rough, you know what I mean? Like, that's interesting, because then that's fun. That's where we should spend more of our time and value those skills more. That's really what I think. Like, how do you test for those skills in people? How do you build teams? They have people that like doing things together. These things are hugely challenging, right? Like, they're way beyond resumes.
Yeah.
But if we spent more time there, I think it's worthwhile, and let the AI do all the maybe do all the iteration, right? I mean, I'm a huge fan of iterative work. Maybe it can get through a few cycles for us. That'd be the best, right?
Yeah. Problem decomposition. Yeah, into small, manageable chunks. Yes.
Love it, love it. And if you could get some prioritization and scale
Mm.
on those, that's what we'll do next time, Jack. But we should stop now.
All
I have
right.
some cold ramen to eat. Thank you, as always, for letting me
Okay.
ramble.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. That was interesting.
Well, always good. And I really do appreciate your perspective, and charts and graphs for the win, man.
Yeah.
Well done.
All right.
All right. Talk
Okay.
next week.
Yeah. Until next time. Yeah.
All right.